Section 5. Gathering Weekly Mission Offerings. Thanksgiving for Past Achievement. We thank God that our Sabbath schools have contributed enough to advance many a precious enterprise. Children and youth have given their pennies that like rivulets have supplied a stream of beneficence. Children should be educated in such a way that they may perform unselfish acts which heaven will rejoice to see. When the dew of youth is upon them, children should be trained how to do service for Christ. They should be taught self-denial. Regularity and system in giving. The matter of giving is not left to impulse. God has given us definite instruction in regard to it. He has specified tithes and offerings as the measure of our obligation, and He desires us to give regularly and systematically. Paul wrote to the church at Corinth concerning the collection for the saints, "As I have given order to the churches of Galatia, so do ye. Upon the first day of the week let every one of you lay by him in store as God hath prospered him. Let each regularly examine his income, which is all a blessing from God, and set apart the tithe as a separate fund to be sacredly the Lord's. This fund should not in any case be devoted to any other use. It is to be devoted solely to support the ministry of the gospel. After the tithe is set apart, let gifts and offerings be apportioned as God hath prospered you." Systematic weekly giving. The offerings of little children may be acceptable and pleasing to God. In accordance with the Spirit that prompts the gifts will be the value of the offering. The poor, by following the rule of the apostle and laying by a small sum every week, help to swell the treasury, and their gifts are wholly acceptable to God, for they make just as great and even greater sacrifices than their more wealthy brethren. The plan of systematic benevolence will prove a safeguard to every family against temptations to spend means for needless things, and especially will it prove a blessing to the rich by guarding them from indulging in extravagances. Every week the demands of God upon each family are brought to mind by each of its members fully carrying out the plan, and as they have denied themselves some superfluity in order to have means to put into the treasury, lessons of value and self-denial for the glory of God have been impressed upon the heart. Once a week each is brought face to face with the doings of the past week, the income that he might have had if he had been economical, and the means that he does not have because of indulgence. His conscience is reined up, as it were, before God, and neither commends or accuses him. He learns that if he retains peace of mind in the favor of God, he must eat and drink and dress to His glory. A signal honor. God in His wise plans had made the advancement of His cause dependent upon the personal efforts of His people and upon their free will offerings. By accepting the cooperation of man in the great plan of redemption, He has placed a signal honor upon him. The minister cannot preach except he be sent. The work of dispensing light does not rest upon ministers alone. Every person, upon becoming a member of the church, pledges himself to be a representative of Christ by living out the truth he professes. The followers of Christ should carry forward the work which He left for them to do when He ascended into heaven. God's providence in advance of our liberality. The smaller and the larger streams of beneficence should ever be kept flowing. God's providence is far ahead of us, moving onward much faster than our liberalities. The way for the advancement and upbuilding of the cause of God is blocked by selfishness, pride, covetousness, extravagance, and love of display. The whole church is charged with a solemn responsibility to lift in every branch of the work. If its members follow Christ, they will deny the inclination for display, the love of dress, the love of elegant houses and costly furniture. There must be far greater humility, a much greater distinction from the world among Seventh-day Adventists, else God will not accept us, whatever our position or the character of our work in which we are engaged. Economy and self-denial will furnish many in moderate circumstances with means for benevolence. It is the duty of all to learn of Christ, to walk humbly in the self-denying path in which the majesty of heaven trod. The whole Christian life should be one of self-denial, that when calls for help are made, we may be ready to respond. As long as Satan works with unremitting energy to destroy souls, as long as there is a call for laborers in any part of the wide harvest field, so long will there be a call to give for the support of the work of God in some one of its many lines. We relieve one need only to make way to relieve another of like character. The self-denial required to obtain means to invest in that which God values most highly will develop habits and a character which will win for us the approbation, "Well done," and make us fit to dwell forever in the presence of Him who for our sake became poor, that we through His poverty might inherit eternal riches. When we may tire of giving. "Well," says one, "the calls keep coming to give to the cause. I am weary of giving. Are you? Then let me ask, are you weary of receiving from God's beneficent hand? Not until He ceases to bless you will you cease to be under bonds to return to Him the portion He claims. He blesses you that it may be in your power to bless others. When you are weary of receiving, then you may say, I am weary of so many calls to give." Extension of the work. God's people have a mighty work before them, a work that must continually rise to greater prominence. Our efforts in missionary lines must become far more extensive. A more decided work than has been done must be done prior to the second appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ. God's people are not to cease their labors until they shall encircle the world. Do not plead for retrenchment. From every church, prayers should ascend to God for an increase of devotion and liberality. My brethren and sisters, do not plead for retrenchment in the evangelical work. So long as there are souls to save, our interest in the work of soul-saving is to know no abating. The church cannot abridge her task without denying her master. Not all can go as missionaries to foreign lands, but all can give of their means for the carrying forward of foreign missions. Shall we do our best? My soul is stirred within me as the Macedonian cry comes from every direction, from the cities and villages of our own land, from across the Atlantic and the broad Pacific, and from the islands of the sea. Come over and help us. Brethren and sisters, will you answer the cry, saying, we will do our best both in sending you missionaries and money? We'll deny ourselves in the embellishment of our homes, in the adornment of our persons, and the gratification of appetite. We will give the means entrusted to us into the cause of God, and we will devote ourselves also unreservedly to His work. The wants of the cause are laid before us. The empty treasuries appeal to us most pathetically for help. $1 now is of more value to the work than $10 will be at some future period. Work, brethren, work while you have the opportunity, while the day lasts. Work, for the night cometh when no man can work. How soon that night may come, it is impossible for you to tell. Now is your opportunity. Improve it. If there are some who cannot give personal effort in missionary work, let them live economically and give of their earnings. Praying and giving for missions. Brethren and sisters, will you today pledge yourselves before God to pray for these workers who have been chosen to go to other lands? Will you pledge yourselves not only to pray for them, but to sustain them with your tithes and offerings? Will you pledge yourselves to practice strict self-denial in order that you may have more to give for the advancement of the work in the regions beyond? We feel moved by the Spirit of God to ask you to pledge yourselves before Him to lay by something weekly for the support of our missionaries. God will help and bless you in doing this. Devising ways and means. The Church of Christ on earth was organized for missionary purposes, and the Lord desires to see the entire church devising ways and means whereby high and low, rich and poor may hear the message of truth. Not all are called to personal labor in foreign fields, but all can give something by their prayers and their gifts to aid the missionary work. An American businessman who was an earnest Christian in conversation with a fellow worker, remarked that he himself worked for Christ 24 hours of the day. In all my business relations, he said, I try to represent my master. As I have opportunity, I try to win others to him. All day I am working for Christ, and at night while I sleep I have a man working for him in China, advancing home missionary work. To show a liberal, self-denying spirit for the success of foreign missions is a sure way to advance home missionary work. For the prosperity of the home work depends largely under God upon the reflex influence of the evangelical work done in countries afar off. It is in working to supply the necessities of others that we bring our souls into touch with the source of all power. The Lord has marked every phase of missionary zeal that has been shown by His people in behalf of foreign fields. He designs that in every home, in every church, and at all the centers of the work, a spirit of liberality shall be shown in sending help to foreign fields, where the workers are struggling against great odds to bring the light to those who sit in darkness. That which is given to start the work in one field will result in strengthening the work in other places. God honors faithful stewards. God has made men His stewards. The property which He has placed in their hands is the means that He has provided for the spread of the gospel. To those who prove themselves faithful stewards, He will commit greater trust. Saith the Lord, them that honor me I will honor. God loveth a cheerful giver. And when His people with grateful hearts bring their gifts and offerings to Him, not grudgingly or of necessity, His blessing will attend them as He has promised. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. What might have been? A flood of light is shining from the Word of God, and there must be an awakening to neglected opportunities. When all are faithful in giving back to God His own in tithes and offerings, the way will be open for the world to hear the message for this time. If the hearts of God's people were filled with love for Christ, if every church member were thoroughly imbued with the spirit of self-sacrifice, if all manifested thorough earnestness, there would be no lack of funds for home or foreign missions. Our resources would be multiplied. 1,000 doors of usefulness would be opened, and we should be invited to enter. Had the purpose of God been carried out by His people in giving to the world the message of mercy, Christ would ere this have come to the earth, and the saints would have received their welcome into the city of God. Continual bestowal upon the continual giver. Should all who claim to be sons and daughters of God conscientiously meet their obligations to God and their fellow men in tithes and offerings, an abundance would flow into the treasury to sustain the work of God in its different branches throughout our world. As they should impart, the Lord would open ways whereby they would be able continually to bestow, because they were continually receiving. There would then be no occasion to make appeals for means to sustain the cause. If the principle of giving to the Lord His own were carried out regularly and systematically, it would be acknowledged of God. Them that honor me I will honor. Higher motives than sympathy. The moral darkness of a ruined world pleads to Christian men and women to put forth individual effort, to give of their means and of their influence, that they may be assimilated to the image of Him who, though He possessed infinite riches, yet for our sakes became poor. The Spirit of God cannot abide with those to whom He has sent the message of His truth, but who need to be urged before they can have any sense of their duty to be co-workers with Christ. The Apostle enforces the duty of giving from higher grounds than merely human sympathy, because the feelings are moved. He enforces the principle that we should labor unselfishly with an eye single to the glory of God. Overcoming natural selfishness. Men are not naturally inclined to be benevolent, but to be sordid and avaricious, and to live for self. And Satan is ever ready to present the advantages to be gained by using all their means for selfish worldly purposes. He is glad when he can influence them to shirk duty and to rob God in tithes and offerings. But no one is excused in this matter. Let every one of you lay by him in store as God hath prospered him. The poor and the rich, the young men and the young women who earn wages, all are to lay by a portion, for God claims it. The spiritual prosperity of every member of the church depends on personal effort and strict fidelity to God. Teaching benevolence to children in the home. Our great adversary is continually working with power to allure the youth to self-indulgence, pride, and extravagance, that their minds and hearts may be so fully taken up with these things that there will be no place for God in their affections. He is by these means warping the character and dwarfing the intellect of the youth of this generation. It is the duty of parents to counteract his working. Every influence brought to bear upon the young people to preserve in their hearts true, unaffected humility, and the knowledge of the divine will aid in holding them back from being corrupted with the vices of this age. One of the most effective barricades against the incoming tide of evil is a cultivation of habits of self-denial and benevolence. Children should be educated to look with disgust upon habits of selfishness and covetousness. God has sacred claims upon them, and they need to be instructed line upon line, precept upon precept, to recognize and conscientiously regard these claims. It should be kept before the young and tender minds that God is constantly giving his blessing to his dependent children in the sunshine and showers which cause vegetation to flourish and the earth to yield her bounties for the service of man. These blessings are not bestowed upon us to encourage our selfish natures by retaining the treasures of God's bounty and fixing our affections on them, but that we may render back to the giver gifts and offerings. This is the least expression of gratitude and love that we can return to our benevolent Creator. There has been a great neglect on the part of parents in not seeking to interest their children in the workings of the cause of God. In many families, the children seem to be left out of the question as if they were irresponsible beings. Some parents even rob God of his just claims in tithes and offerings that they may save wealth for their children, not thinking that in so doing they are opening to their loved ones a door of temptation which will generally prove their ruin. They remove from the children the necessity of personal exertion, and with it an incentive to noble achievement. If they were encouraged to do so, the children would earn means to devote to benevolent purposes and to the advancement of the cause of God, and their interest would be increased by the fact that they had invested something in these enterprises. Their small donations would be a material aid, and the children themselves would be far better physically, mentally, and morally for the effort they had made. Through diligence and self-denial, they would gain valuable experience, which would help them in making a success of this life as well as in securing the life to come. Restricting imaginary wants. If men today were simple in their habits, living in harmony with nature's laws as did Adam and Eve in the beginning, there would be an abundant supply for the needs of the human family. There would be fewer imaginary wants and more opportunities to work in God's ways. But selfishness and the indulgence of unnatural tastes have brought sin and misery into the world from excess on the one hand and from want on the other. No unhealthful stimulation needed. Those who keep eternal realities in view, who love the Lord with all the heart and soul and strength, and their neighbors themselves, will conscientiously do their whole duty as if the curtain were rolled back and they could see that they were working in view of the heavenly universe. The spirit of Christian liberality will strengthen as it is exercised and will not need to be unhealthfully stimulated. All who possess this spirit, the Spirit of Christ, will with cheerful alacrity press their gifts into the Lord's treasury. Inspired by love for Christ and for the souls for whom he has died, they feel an intense earnestness to act their part with fidelity. A revenue of small gifts. Parents have not taught their children the precepts of the law as God has commanded them. They have educated them in selfish habits. They have taught them to regard their birthdays and holidays as occasions when they expect to receive gifts, and to follow the habits and customs of the world. These occasions, which should serve to increase the knowledge of God and to awaken thankfulness of heart for His mercy and love in preserving their lives for another year, are turned into occasions for self-pleasing, for the gratification and glorification of the children. They have been kept by the power of God through every moment of their life, and yet parents do not teach their children to think of this and to express thanksgiving for His mercy toward them. If children and youth had been properly instructed in this age of the world, what honor, what praise and thanksgiving would flow from their lips to God. What a revenue of small gifts would be brought from the hands of the little ones to be put into His treasury as thank offerings. God would be remembered instead of forgotten. Birthday offerings. Under the Jewish economy, on the birth of children, an offering was made to God by His own appointment. Now we see parents taking special pains to present gifts to their children upon their birthdays. They make this an occasion of honoring the child as though honor were due to the human being. Satan has had his way in these things. He has diverted the minds and the gifts to human beings. Thus the thoughts of the children are turned to themselves, as if they were to be made the objects of special favor. That which should flow back to God in offerings to bless the needy and carry the light of truth to the world is turned from the right channel, and frequently does more harm than good, encouraging vanity, pride, and self-importance. On birthday occasions, the children should be taught that they have reason for gratitude to God for His loving kindness in preserving their lives for another year. Precious lessons might thus be given. For life, health, food, and clothing, no less than for the hope of eternal life, we are indebted to the Giver of all mercies, and it is due to God to recognize His gifts and to present our offerings of gratitude to our greatest benefactor. These birthday gifts are recognized of heaven, a reminder of God's care and love. Our birthday anniversaries and Christmas and Thanksgiving festivals are too often devoted to selfish gratification, when the mind should be directed to the mercy and loving kindness of God. God is displeased that His goodness, His constant care, His unceasing love are not brought to mind on these anniversary occasions. Putting God's requirements first. God's requirements come first. We are not doing His will if we consecrate to Him what is left of our income after all our imaginary wants have been supplied. Before any part of our earnings is consumed, we should take out and present to Him that portion which He claims. In the old dispensation, an offering of gratitude was kept continually burning upon the altar, thus showing man's endless obligation to God. If we have prosperity in our secular business, it is because God blesses us. A part of this income is to be devoted to the poor, and a large portion to be applied to the cause of God. When that which God claims is rendered to Him, the remainder will be sanctified and blessed to our own use. But when a man robs God by withholding that which He requires, his curse rests upon the whole. Our divine exemplar. The foundation of the plan of salvation was laid in sacrifice. Jesus left the royal courts and became poor, that we through His poverty might be made rich. All who share this salvation, purchased for them at such an infinite sacrifice by the Son of God, will follow the example of the true pattern. Christ was the chief cornerstone, and we must build upon this foundation. Each must have a spirit of self-denial and self-sacrifice. Christ values deeds of love. Christ values acts of heartfelt courtesy. When anyone did Him a favor with heavenly politeness, He blessed the actor. He did not refuse the simplest flower plucked by the hand of a child and offered to Him in love. He accepted the offerings of children and blessed the givers, inscribing their names in the book of life. In the Scriptures, Mary's anointing of Jesus is mentioned as distinguishing her from the other Marys. Acts of love and reverence for Jesus are an evidence of faith in Him as the Son of God. No offering is small that is given with true-heartedness and gladness of soul. God's part and ours. The only means which God has ordained to advance His cause is to bless men with property. He gives them the sunshine and the rain. He causes vegetation to flourish. He gives health and ability to acquire means. All our blessings come from His bountiful hand. In turn, He would have men and women show their gratitude by returning Him a portion in tithes and offerings, in thank offerings, in freewill offerings, in trespass offerings. The highest efficiency of the loving gift, the offering from the heart that loves, God delights to honor, giving it highest efficiency in service for Him. If we have given our hearts to Jesus, we also shall bring our gifts to Him. Our gold and silver, our most precious earthly possessions, our highest mental and spiritual endowments, will be freely devoted to Him who loved us and gave Himself for us. A condition of prosperity. The contributions required of the Hebrews for religious and charitable purposes amounted to fully 1/4 of their income. So heavy a tax upon the resources of the people might be expected to reduce them to poverty. But on the contrary, the faithful observance of these regulations was one of the conditions of their prosperity. On condition of their obedience, God made them this promise: I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. Every offering with its motive chronicled. I was shown that the recording angel makes a faithful record of every offering dedicated to God and put into the treasury, and also of the final result of the means thus bestowed. The eye of God takes cognizance of every farthing devoted to His cause, and of the willingness or reluctance of the giver. The motive in giving is also chronicled. Those self-sacrificing, consecrated ones who render back to God the things that are His, as He requires of them, will be rewarded according to their works, even though the means thus consecrated be misapplied, so that it does not accomplish the object which the donor had in view, the glory of God and the salvation of souls. Those who made the sacrifice in sincerity of soul, with an eye single to the glory of God, will not lose their reward.